gives us the reaction, Okonkwo's reaction to the murder of Ikemefuna. We see that he has fallen into a state of depression and despair. He is drinking palm wine, he's not eating, he can't sleep, he's trying not to think about it, but he can't stop thinking about it. And this goes on for 3 days. Okay. On the 3rd day, he asks Akwefi, his second wife, to roast plantains for him, that maybe this will be something that will help him. And he knows that she prepares it just the way he likes. And so Izinma, his daughter, brings the food to him. Now I think that's plot development, but it also is characterization, because we see that it is Akwefi who knows just how to prepare something the way Okonkwo likes his food to be prepared. And there must be more than just the arrangement of a marriage. You know, if she puts that much effort into the preparing of his food, more so than just get it done, but that she knows how he likes it, and she likes to make it the way he likes it, and that he asks just for her to do it, implies that there's a connection between them that perhaps he doesn't share with his other 2 wives. So Izinma brings the food in, and she really shows her maturity because she is concerned about him, and she is worried. Okonkwo says she should have been a boy. Now, before we think that he feels that way because perhaps she embodies the characteristics of manlyhood, but in a female, I don't think so. I think it's because, from Okonkwo's point of view, he can have a relationship with his sons that he can't have with his daughters. And there's a connection between Izinma and him for whatever reason. And because she's not a son, he feels like the only connection that they could have would be an emotional one. And that's not the kind of relationship that he would allow himself to have. Therefore, he can't have a relationship with her. Whereas with his sons, they could be, manly together. And that is a relationship he would allow himself to have because it's not an expression of weakness in his mind. And that is why he wishes or thinks that she should have been a boy. Not because she's a tomboy or because she's brave and courageous, although she probably has, is a more spirited person. But that's not what it is. It's this idea that he connects with her for some reason and can't enjoy a relationship with her because she's not a boy. Oh, and again, that's not Achebe saying that all men feel this way, but that it's one more way that Okonkwo is limited in his life because everything he does and sees and experiences is driven by his fear of weakness. Okay, so back to this story. Izinma sits with him, and she brings him his bag of snuff, and again he thinks to himself, because he's enjoying her company, that she should have been a boy. And then he goes on to say, if only he could find some work to do, he'd be able to get past this. He could lose himself in his work. But he's already done everything, and there's nothing else to do. And he begins to get mad at himself. When did you become a woman? Someone who was just emotional, basically. you've killed men. You've cut them to pieces. You know, when did this happen to you? And so perhaps thinking about battle reminds him of other men, reminds him of his best friend, and he gets up to visit Obi Erika. And Obi Erika was sitting outside, and he was working on thatches, which is the covering of the top of his hut. So if you look at the picture that I've used for this podcast, taken directly from Google Images, thatching is what you see as part of the roof. And it's when you take palm fronds and you have to kind of weave them and tie them together very tightly so that it is a very good roof. And that's what he's doing in the shade when Okonkwo comes by. And so Obi Erika says, "Oh, I was going to come and see you as soon as I finished this." Okonkwo asks if everything's okay. Like, "Oh, is everything right? Why would you need to come see me?" And he says, "Oh, yes, everything's fine, but my daughter's suitor is coming." So in other words, this boy from another village who wants to marry his daughter is coming. And they're going to settle the matter of the bride price, and he wants you to be there. He wants Okonkwo to be there. And then Obi Erika's son comes, Maduka. And this is the one who was the great wrestler from chapter 6 that Okonkwo was admiring. And so Okonkwo shakes his hand and he praises him for his wrestling. And then, Maduka leaves, and Okonkwo says to Obi Erika, "He will do great things. I would be really happy if I had a son like that. I worry about Nawoya. He doesn't have any strength." And he says, "I've got 2 younger brothers, and they're a little bit more promising, but honestly, I don't really feel like any of my sons are what I would like them to be. They don't remind me of myself at all." And anyway, Obi Erika says, "You worry yourself for nothing. They're just children." But Okonkwo says to himself, actually, Nawoya is a teenager. He's old enough that he could impregnate a woman. He says, by that age, I was already, fending for myself. I was already a man. And so he says, "No, I know that he's basically a lost cause." And he says there's too much of his mother in him. Now, Obi Erika thinks to himself, but doesn't say it out loud, there's too much of his grandfather. And Obi Erika doesn't say it out loud because he knows that the same thought is in Okonkwo's mind, that he's seeing in his son the same spirit that was in his father. Okay? All right. So Okonkwo also has the same thought. And anytime he remembers his father, he thinks of weakness. And so then he is driven to show strength instead. His mind then goes to his most recent display of manliness. And then he verbalizes that experience because he needs to justify his actions. He says to Obi Erika, "I don't understand why you refused to come with us to kill that boy." And Obi Erika says, "Because I did not want to. I had something better to do." And Okonkwo challenges him and says, "You sound as if you question the oracle. You sound as if you don't think it was the right thing to do." And Obi Erika defends himself and says, "Why should I? I don't question it. Why should I? But the oracle didn't ask me to carry out its decision." And Okonkwo then counters that argument by saying, "Well, somebody has to do it, and if we're all afraid of blood, it wouldn't get done." So he, kind of implies that Obi Erika was afraid of blood, and that's why he couldn't do it. So he questions his manliness. And again, why is he doing this? Because he needs to justify his own behavior. He needs to be able to say, to feel that what he has done is the right thing. Otherwise, he can't get out of his despair. And so Obiarika responds to him, not with another argument, but he puts him in his place. He says, "You know very well that I am not afraid of blood. And if anyone tells you that I am, he's telling a lie, and we all know that." So we know, in other words, that that I have proven myself in battle. We know that I don't shy away from that. What he's trying to say is, we all know that I am good in battle when it's necessary. Okay? And then he says, "Let me tell you one more thing. If I were you, I would have stayed at home. What you have done will not please the earth." Back to the idea of Ani, the earth goddess. It's the kind of action for which goddess wipes out whole families. Okay, and I think that is foreshadowing. And then Okonkwo says, not to be worried. The earth can't punish me for obeying her messenger. Okay? And here again we have this argument. What's the balance between religion and reason? When does religion run away with itself? And when are we doing things for our religion that make no sense? Okay? We have to balance that. And Okonkwo's way of making himself feel better is to put blind faith in what has been decreed. And he uses a proverb: a child's fingers are not scalded by a piece of hot yam which its mother puts into its palm. No mother would put burning food into a child's hand because she protects the child. She has the child's best interests in mind. Likewise, if the gods tell us to do this, then they're not going to punish us for following their decisions. And Obiarika agrees that that's true, but having said that, if the oracle told me that my son should be killed, I wouldn't dispute it, but I also wouldn't be the one to do it. Now that's kind of a passive way of looking at the situation, because it's playing the middle ground. It's saying, well, that may be, and I'm not going to be the one to say that that's wrong, but I'm also not going to be the one to go along with it. It's taking the path of least resistance. And that helps us to see the flaw in Obiarika as well. Because while he represents the ability to use reason with this Igbo religion, he doesn't take it as far enough to help others change what they're doing, because it's inherently wrong. Okay? So in this way, we don't see Achebe just holding up Obiarika as the model of faith, because he's not acting. He's not acting on behalf of his beliefs. If he feels that this is wrong, he's not doing anything about it. He's just choosing not to participate. And that's not quite good enough. Okay? All right. I guess I'm going to have to do a part 2 on this chapter as well, because it's somewhat long. So I'll stop there, and we'll go on to the next part in the next podcast.